At Millennium Rain Energy, people are always asking me, how did you get started in this anyway? What made you think about hydrogen from wind and solar? Well, it's a long story, but I think I can tell it in about 10 minutes if you hang with me long enough. It's pretty interesting story, actually. I was a farmer and a mechanic originally, and my dad and my brother still farm, as a matter of fact, today, about 3,800 acres in the Dayton, Ohio area. And we were, growing up on the farm, I was kind of a MacGyver type. I, was a mechanic and electrician, and not very good electrician though, by the way. And but I had to learn plumbing and carpentry and working on equipment and tearing down tractors and engines and all kinds of things like that in order to be able to, save money on the farm. And so that started my mechanical background, kinda, and then I went from there to become a diesel mechanic for Mack Truck, and then I was a fleet mechanic for U-Haul, and then after that I became a financial advisor, and I worked as a senior vice president with a company called Primerica that was a Citigroup company, and I was licensed to sell mutual funds and insurance and investments and banking instruments such as loans and mortgages through Citigroup companies like Smith Barney and Travelers and Citigroup and Citibank. And so I had a firm that was a company within a company with a company called Primerica that was owned by Citigroup, and we taught people how to get out of debt and save money for their future and buy the right type of life insurance, and we had an ongoing training program, and one of the people that I was training was a guy by the name of Dave Erball, and he had went to school with my brother and sister. He was about 4 years behind me in school, and I went to school with his brother, so I knew him kind of that way. And I was talking to him one night and kind of recruited him in to try to take a look at being a financial advisor. And so one night after training him, we went back to his place, and we were sitting there, and I was talking about the clients that we just talked, how it went. And he had this really strange looking thing sitting on his desk, and it was called a, well, I didn't know what it was called. It looked funny to me. And I asked him what it was called, and he says, "Oh, that's an electrolyzer." And I said, "What's an electrolyzer?" And he says, "Well, it makes hydrogen and oxygen out of water and electricity." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "Well, what good's hydrogen?" And he said, "Well, the space shuttle runs on it." And I was like, "You're kidding me? That's like you can get that kind of energy out of being able to just take water and turn it into fuel?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Man, why aren't we doing that? Instead of gasoline?" And he proceeded to, of course you have to remember this was like 24 years ago. And we had a situation where at that time, fuel was, gasoline for your car was still 80 cents a gallon. And he also described that the electrolysis process takes a lot of electricity, and it would be costly. And then the equipment was very expensive. As a matter of fact, when we first started investigating it for really getting serious about it, we've discovered that it cost $125,000 just to make one hydrogen generator that would be the size for one person's home. So we knew that there were going to be a lot of problems, but being the MacGyver type from the farm, after I left him that night, my mind just started working on what could we do, how could we attack these problems and cause people to be able to take advantage of this technology. And so I came up with, what if you took wind and solar and you made that be your electricity? And because once after the initial capital cost was over, the electricity is actually free. And then what if, all these companies, it seems like everybody out there that creates a product goes through this massive R&D deal, and they'll have anywhere from $2 million, $1 million to $50 million in research and development on a product, and then they all want to get all their money back out right up front, and they incorporate that cost into the product. And we decided that we would eat the research and development. That way we could get the product cost down right out of the gate. And then and we also felt like we could probably make it cheaper anyway. So then we had those ideas, and we had a 6-hour road trip while to learn about the thing that we were in. At that time it was A.L. Williams, which grew into Primerica and then into Citigroup. We had a 6-hour road trip, and on the way back, I explained to him what my concept was: that wind and solar, making hydrogen, store the hydrogen for later, and then when there was no wind and there was no sun, you could get the hydrogen back out. And I didn't even know about fuel cells at the time. I just assumed that we could take it and put it into an engine, internal combustion engine, and switch it to run on hydrogen. When in fact we're already running on hydrogen today, all of us, because when we use gasoline or diesel fuel, that's a hydrocarbon, meaning there's hydrogen attached to carbon. So we're just eliminating the carbon part, and it's much better for the environment. So I assumed that that would work. And then so we proceeded to play devil's advocate for 6 hours on this idea. And by the time we got back home to Dayton, Ohio, we thought we pretty much had it figured out. And but a couple weeks went by, and Dave decided that he wasn't interested in doing financial services, and as many people weren't. And so he went on to do his own thing. And in doing his own thing, I didn't see him again for 13 and a half years. I went on and built my company, and I ended up with about $28 million worth of assets under management, and I had about 250 people in my company at one time, where we were in 6 different states licensed, so I became pretty successful there and bought my dream home, and everything was going along good. And then 9/11 happened. And it just so happens that today, when we shoot this is the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. And I had that $28 million in assets I had under management when the stock market fell, dropped to about $15 million in assets under management. And I was making a renewal income on part of that block of business, and lost about $20,000 a year in income because of that, right after buying this house. And then I also had my very best guy. He was extremely good at the business under me, and my income off of his block of business was about $50,000 a year. And he died suddenly of cancer, and one thing led to another after that, and his block of business withered up, and I lost another $50,000 a year from that, and couldn't get it back. So within like a 6-month period of time, I lost $70,000 a year. And I was sitting at my desk one day. Here I am, a financial advisor. I'm broke. I'm down and out. I'm thinking about filing bankruptcy, and actually went to see the bankruptcy attorneys, and I'm praying, and I'm saying, God, I need some kind of miracle here. I need something that everybody needs and nobody's got and everybody can afford. And I'm thinking about, what could I do? And suddenly the door opens, and the mailman walks in my financial services office, because he had a box that was too big to fit in our outdoor mailbox. So he brings it right into my office, and I'm sitting behind my desk, and he leans forward to set it on there, and this magazine dribbles off. And it's this picture of a camel on the magazine, an animated camel, and it's got a barrel of oil strapped to its back. And it's got 6 different people from all places of the earth, Chinese and Russians and Americans and all different people from all over the earth, tugging on this camel's 4 legs and his tail and his neck, fighting over the world's last barrel of oil. And the caption in the bottom corner said, "Mother Earth will pump her last barrel of oil out of ground in 2029. Now, since then, I've learned that this is something called peak oil. And right now, there's supposed to be somewhere close to 15 different countries that are have said that they've peaked out in production. They cannot produce any more than what they're producing. And so this is a real problem. And because with India and China coming online, and they're, throwing their bicycles and their and their donkeys aside, and they're getting mopeds and motorcycles and cars, the demand for oil is going up as the actual amount of oil we have is not going up. All you got to do is listen to some of the people around the world that are talking about this, and you know that's correct. And so as supply goes down and demand goes up, the laws of supply and demand say the gas is going to get more and more and more expensive. And so I knew that then, and when I saw that, I was blown away. But what I was even more blown away by was when I opened up the magazine and looked inside. It said that hydrogen was the answer, and that whoever could figure out how to change the fossil fuel-based economy to a hydrogen-based economy would be called hydrogenaires. You know, and remember, I'm sitting there about ready to file bankruptcy, and I'm thinking hydrogenaire sounds pretty good to me right now, you know. And so I had these two rocket scientists that was working for us, learning how to be financial advisors, so when they retired from the Air Force Base that they could be financial advisors. And I took them to lunch. I told them about my idea and shared it with them, and they'd like, you know, that sounds like a great idea. That sounds like that would work in theory, you know. And wind and solar, making hydrogen, store it for later, you know, turn it back into electricity, and then, you know, you can be completely energy independent and off the grid and not need anything. Gasoline, no propane, no natural gas, no diesel fuel, no electricity from the power company ever again. You know, you'd be completely individually energy independent, which is much different than what you hear all the time about energy independence. We're talking individual energy independence here. And so the next day, one of those two gentlemen brought in this stack of papers this thick, and he says, here's all the different components around the world that you'd need to build something like that. And that began my research, my real research into it. And the more I researched it, the more I began to think, man, somebody's going to beat me to this if I don't do something about it. And I had thought of 3 other major league things that have happened and come to pass before, 3 to 4 years before it happened. And it happened to me in my life 3 different times, and I missed it because I didn't act on it. And I thought, this is not happening to me again. So I started complaining about it around the house all the time. And my wife's like, shut up and just submit the patent, you know, and at least you buy yourself some time, you know. And I'm like, but we don't have any money, and patents cost a lot of money, you know. And she's like, well, just figure out how to do it yourself and do it yourself. So that's exactly what I did. I mean, even to the point where I was terrible at typing. I went and bought a thing called Naturally Speaking Dragon and taught my computer to hear my voice and type for itself, so I didn't have to type it. And then I sent it to some attorneys that we had in a company called Prepaid Legal, and they looked at it. They looked it over, and they would look over a document for free for you as part of the process. And I sent it to the patent office, and I mailed it from my hometown in Eaton, Ohio. And when I got there, you know, and I actually went there because I needed to deliver a contract to one of my clients also, and I was hungry, and I stopped by this local place to get a sandwich. And I walked in the door, and who'd I see but Dave, the very guy, Dave Erball, the guy that I had talked about it with in the car 13 and a half years before that. And I was just like, man, that has to be a God thing right there, you know. I mean, how could he just show up again? Hadn't seen him for 13 and a half years. The day I submit the patent in on the last thing we were talking about, he shows up again. And so I go, Dave, guess what, man? I just sent in this patent on that idea. And he's like, no way. I'm like, yeah, I did. And he goes, oh, man, I can't believe that. And I said, I'll go out to the car and get you the copy. You know, I got a copy of it. So I went out to the car and gave it to him. He came in at 2:30 in the morning. He calls me. I'm asleep. Carol's asleep. And I'm like, hey, who is this? He's like, dude, it's me, Dave. He's like, I just read this thing. Where'd you get all this information? This is incredible, man. You ought to see some of the stuff I know. And the next day, he comes over and brings this little bitty tiny Jiffy peanut butter jar with these electrodes down in it and something to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen. And he brings a 6-volt battery charger and sets it on my desk, and these turns that battery charger on, and these bubbles start fizzing up inside this thing. Looks like somebody shook up a 7-Up glass or something, you know, in there, and they start rising to the top, and it starts getting warm. The water's getting warm, you know, and all of a sudden he takes a lighter and lights one side of it, and fire comes out of that thing on one side of it. And I'm like, wow, that's how it works. That's unbelievable. I was like, we can build a bigger one of those. Let's go out to the farm. So we went out to my dad and my brother's farm, and we stopped by and got us we went to the Tractor Supply store, and we got us some great big bolts, big threaded rod, and we got some flat washers and lock washers, and we put a flat and a lock and a flat and a lock and a flat and a lock all the way down, and then screwed them together and tightened them up and made these gigantic electrodes, and we stuck them down in this big 30-gallon barrel. Okay, and it was it was a herbicide barrel, and we put that thing in there, and then we put a 24-volt battery charger on there, and to give that water some continuity, we dumped 5 gallons of battery acid in there. And the only reason we did that was because we put a gallon in to 30 gallons, and it wasn't working, and we kept putting it in, and it still wasn't working, and then we found out we didn't have the thing plugged in. But so when we finally plugged it in and worked, man, we were making hydrogen in 1 minute and 24 seconds. We were filling up a 2-inch tube that was 3 feet long in a minute, and it would push the water column down off of the electrode because the hydrogen was building up, and then it wouldn't work anymore. And so we had a really cool thing going on there, and so we'd light it and start it back up again, and it'd come right back to life, you know, and make hydrogen again. So we left there real excited. And on the way home, I had seen earlier in the week that there was another farm, not ours, but another farm that was about between my house and my dad's house that were putting up wind turbines. They were putting up 6 wind turbines, and so I was just like, you know, what if that guy could see what we're seeing, and then we could use his wind turbines and not have to spend that money on buying those, and the technology we'd build, and we could somehow partnership somehow and build these wind turbines and solar and the hydrogen all together. Well, that's exactly what happened. Mr. Ralph Dahl came out and looked at what we were doing, and I mean, this man's the salt of the earth, and without him and his family and what they did for us, you know, getting this thing started, we just never would have been where we're at right now, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. But they granted us the initial funds to get started, and now we have our center that we have here that is with the fueling station, and we have the 6 wind turbines, and we have a 22 kilowatt solar array, and we have a vertical access wind turbine, and we're really doing everything that we dreamed that we could do back in 2003. And we're doing it now, and here coming up soon, you know, we're having a large car company. A nationally known, a world-renowned car company is bringing one of their fuel cell cars to actually fuel up on our fueling station. And you know, I'm traveling around the world now. I'm actually in Hawaii, in Kona, Hawaii, in a studio at the University of the Nations while I'm taping this, and talking to the advisory council here and other people around the globe that have campuses and missionary sites about how they can make villages become energy independent and off the grid. And we're talking about packaging this all up in a box and being able to drop it off, and everything you need is in there. And we're working with relationships with companies all around the world and countries, and it's just really exciting what's going on right now. And you know, and some of the one last thing is that I know for certain is that this is meant to be, and we're where we're supposed to be at this time. When we were building this thing, one of the reasons that you know, we didn't know what size to make it, and we wanted to match it up with a 10 kilowatt of renewable energy. And what happened was that we had I kept seeing these numbers 1111 and 111 all the time. And it was so much so it was like I was in a Twilight Zone thing or something, you know, and people around me started really getting spooked because I was seeing this number, all these two numbers, 1111 and 111, 4 ones and 3 ones all the time. And so doing the math, some of the answers that could have been for building this thing, 1111 and 111 started showing up in that too. So I picked those, and by using those numbers, it ended up being the first one we built that actually worked. The first time out of the gate with 10 kilowatts of power was the same size as the Ark of the Covenant that held the 10 Commandments. And so we named the product the Ark in honor of that. And we named our company Millennium Rain Energy because of the fact that we believe this is the energy source that we'll be using in the Millennium Rain. And so we're just really, really excited about the opportunity and what we have to do. And we're looking for people to support us in all kinds of ways. And you can get in touch with us through our internet website. All of our information is on there at mreh2.com. And we thank you for taking your time to listen to our story.